Hello, friends. My name is Darren, and I am going to help you understand what's going on today in the war in Ukraine. I do these daily, and if you're not familiar with me, please consider subscribing. I'll be back tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. What I normally do is go through the headlines, and then I try to make sense out of any kind of patterns for the day, or fit those patterns into the bigger narrative about what's going on. And there is a hot war, a military war, we all understand. There's a political war, there's an economic war, there's a propaganda war. But today I want to talk about the energy war, like what's going on. Why does Putin, and I want to try to answer the question, why does Putin try to go after power generation stations and try to go after water facilities and dams and other things along these lines? So here we go. I'm going to start with this article from Interfax Ukraine. Now this was, and generally I do only the articles of the day of, and if I am not on the article of the day of, I'm going to explain that as well. So here's an article from 4 days ago, the 25th. Okay, and it said in the past 2 weeks, Ukraine has been subjected to the most extensive shelling over the entire period of the full-scale war, and that's true, right? It picked up when the time that the Kerch was hit, missiles started like striking. And by the way, while we're on this point, yesterday I was talking about how 16,000 missiles have hit Ukraine in the 9 months of this war. 97% of them hit non-military targets. I'm watching Jake Bro yesterday, and I think I've said this kind of thing before, but I don't know that I've said it fully, so I'm giving Jake full credit for this. And he was talking about like it's instead of shooting at other military, which is what you're supposed to do with those missiles, he's shooting at civilian targets because what he's trying to do is cause Kyiv to fold because he can't win on the ground. And I believe that that's true. I honestly believe there's no way outside a nuclear weapon that's going to make him a pariah and Russia a pariah to the rest of the world going on and on, right? There's no way militarily in traditional warfare that Russia can beat Ukraine on the ground, in my estimation. I just don't see it. Now, with that being said, I think that what he's trying to do, and this was Jake's point, what he's trying to do is actually cause the Kyiv government to just cry uncle because of all the civilian loss. That's what he's trying to do. So that's the framework for why we're going after these stations. Okay, so in the past 2 weeks, Ukraine has been subject to all these shelling over this entire period of time. November 15th, Russia fired around 100 missiles at Ukrainian citizens and villages. 1,600, so there's 16,000 over the course of the war. That's about 57 a day. 100 missiles at its high water mark on November 15th, and it really amped up after the Kerch Bridge attack. After that, you started seeing these daily missile strikes, and they were hitting residential areas, but they were also hitting power and electrical supply, right? They're trying to leave them without electricity and without water supply. And the electricity and water supply are tied to each other in Ukraine. Like if you can knock out the electrical grid, then the water doesn't pump like it's supposed to. Okay, the best solution to Ukraine's energy problem is missiles with a range of 800 kilometers or more. And so why is he saying it? This is the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council. He's saying the best and most effective solution are these missiles. And why? Which will allow for significant savings on generators, because every time one gets knocked out, that's very expensive. Give us a missile to knock these things down. Or to fire back, to push them back so they can't fire their missiles from any kind of range. Okay, that made me think of the quote that the best defense is a good offense, and I don't know who actually said that one, but Washington himself said something very close to this in a letter. I think it was a letter to Trumbull, but he said offensive operations oftentimes is the surest, if not the only measure of defense. And this guy would know, like Washington, like if you read about Washington, you'll find out like he was a great general, but he was a great general because he ran a track meet. He essentially ran away, struck the British, ran away, struck the British, ran away, struck the British, ran away. Like not getting captured was so much of what he did that when he says something about offensive operations being sometimes the only defense, I'm seeing it. I'm believing it. Okay. At any rate, I think it's a letter to John Trumbull. You can correct me if I got those facts wrong. Okay, back to Ukraine. Due to emergency outages, consumption of household customers in Kyiv limited to 4 to 6 hours per day. Imagine living under those kind of circumstances. In Kyiv, emergency power outages continue. 58% of the capacity allocated by the operator, by the power generating stations, is used to provide critical infrastructure. Like, we have to do these things. We have to secure certain buildings first, or certain critical things that keep other things rolling, or hospitals, or things along those lines. Okay, hospitals, pumping and heating points, only 42% of the remaining capacity is available to power household consumers. So you have to consume less, and some of the ways that they do this, they have rolling blackouts, or they have maybe that's not the right term. They have intentional blackouts for different periods. But they said, quote, "We're doing the best to give light to each client for 2 to 3 hours twice a day. As soon as we manage to balance the situation, we'll return to power outages according to schedules. Stay tuned for updates. We ask you to limit electricity consumption as much as possible in order to help the power industry balance the power system." So if your power system is at full throttle, no problem. If you have to reduce it by, I don't know, a third or half or something like that, now you have to make some priorities and some decisions of who should get what and where it has to go to do the least damage. Okay, another article. This is in The Guardian. Ukraine pleads for help to fix the energy grid hit by Russian bombs. There were power cuts lasting 48 hours or more across the country last week after a fresh wave of Russian missile attacks. Emergency response to get spare parts to Ukraine is being coordinated by the Energy Community, a European trade body. So Europe is on it. They're trying to figure out, okay, what kind of power generation needs do you have? And France gave 1,000 generators, and Estonia gave another 83, which is pretty significant for the size of Estonia. And you start to see on and on. They're starting to figure out, okay, what do they need? How do we put this back together again? But I have to go back to this idea here that he's right. If we could shoot these things down, that's better than having to replace them. So there's that. But let's work on both sides of the equation. Ministers from NATO member countries met for a 2-day meeting in Bucharest, Romania, where it's likely that the 30-nation alliance will make fresh pledges of non-lethal support to Ukraine, including fuel generators, medical supplies, winter equipment, and so on. This is the kind of place where a country that does not want to, be like, look, I'm not really supporting Ukraine. I'm just trying to help humanitarian relief. Those kind of countries can play nice and be involved. Okay, Jens Stoltenberg, he's the NATO Secretary General, said Russia, quote, "is willing to use extreme brutality and leave Ukraine cold and dark this winter." That's right. They're trying to starve out and they're trying to freeze out, rather, old women and children, and people that are most vulnerable are the ones that are going to pay for what they can't actually achieve militarily, what Russia can't do on the ground because their soldiers are not strong enough, or they have been, the military term is, degraded to the point that they can't actually fight in an optimal capacity and overtake their enemy. So this is what they're going to do to civilians. That's called barbarism. Okay, so I mean, Russia is a terrorist state by definition. Ukraine's national grid warned that the country as a whole faced a 30% electrical shortage, and so that leaves you in a tough spot. Okay, another article, this one in Radio Free Europe, same thing. NATO pledges more support. I'm going to skip that because we just talked about it. Another article in CNN, Kyiv says it won't let Putin steal Christmas as Russian attacks threaten a bleak winter. So yeah, they don't, and I actually thought about trying to find or create a Putin with a Grinch hat, but I didn't want to put that picture in your mind because I don't want to spoil the Grinch for you. Officials are racing to restore resources quicker than Russia can knock them out. And that's really what's going on. They fire missiles, they have to build it back together, and fire more missiles, they put it back together. Ukraine's electrical operator said on Tuesday that it was running at 30% deficit. That's 3% higher than the day before. So they're actually kind of getting better at it, but it's still, I mean, it's just a game of how, it's almost like a very bad game of whack-a-mole What the Russians are trying to do, they're trying to knock these out, and they keep popping back up. Okay, so I just want to show you two more things here. And so one is, these are these points of invincibility. The Russian toilet army destroyed a dozen of Ukrainian power facilities. Ukrainians instantly responded by organizing more than 3,000 powered hubs for civilians where you can charge your gadgets, get warmed, have a coffee, want an update on such a place. And so there's this map that they've put out. I can't read who this is, but this map that they put out that essentially has basically tents or other buildings that are warm, that have a place where you can sit, where you can power your iPhone, whatever, so that you can get out of the cold for a little bit if you need to. And the absolute creativity of the Ukrainians has just been phenomenal throughout the war, the way that they improvise. Now, I want to talk about something else here. We just had Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and now I'm going to ask you to think about supporting a Ukrainian by buying something that is Ukrainian kind of mug or hat or shirt or something along these lines. A Ukrainian entrepreneur approached me and said, "Hey, you're doing these videos. Could you please work with me with that?" So if you go and you type in uasupporter.com/my last name GERDES, you'll go right to the site and buy something, and I get pennies on the dollar. He'll actually make some money. You can see these things aren't all cheap, right? I mean, $24 for a mug, you could probably pay less for a mug, but you're also helping him survive in Ukraine rather than be on the dole. So I want you to think about that. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.